Alright guys, so we're going to be taking a look at chapter 22. We're actually going to kind of split this into two kind of lectures. The first is going to focus more on the lymphatic system structures, and the second part is going to focus more on the immunity side. Because the lymphatic system and immunity are pretty much the same, however they do some different things depending on what structures we're looking at. So we're going to look more at the structure part first and looking at a few of the functions with the lymphatic side, and then the part 2 of this chapter will look more at immunity. So when we look at functions of the lymphatic system, it's important to note that the lymphatic system is there to drain any interstitial fluid that forms between the body cells. This is going to be that leftover fluid we talked about in the last chapter, chapter 21, where the veins cannot regain all the fluid that got filtered out by the arteries, and so the lymphatic system helps kind of pick up that extra amount of fluid. It's going to return the plasma proteins also to the blood, so it's going to return this fluid and any proteins that get out to the blood. It's also going to transport dietary fats and fat soluble vitamins from the GI tract to the blood. There's going to be a special section that's going to pick up these particular fats in the GI tract, and they're going to deliver it to the blood. The last part of the lymphatic system is more of the immune system part. It's going to protect against foreign invaders. All right, so we're going to take a look at the structures that are part of the lymphatic system. So when we look at lymphatic fluid, a lot of times it's called lymph. This is essentially interstitial fluid between your cells, but it's located in the lymphatic vessels. So it's only named based on its location. If it's inside the lymphatic vessel, we call it lymphatic fluid or lymph. The lymphatic system is made of lymphatic vessels that resemble blood vessels, lymphatic tissues, and even bone marrow. Now, if lymphatic tissue includes things like lymph nodes, your tonsils, your spleen, your thymus gland, and areas that are called like Pryor's patches, which are located around your intestines. So let's talk about lymphatic vessels real quick. Now, lymphatic vessels are going to run along with your arteries in your veins, and a lot of times around these capillary beds, because the whole point is to help absorb fluid so that we don't have edema and swelling. So when we look at the lymphatic vessel, they begin as a blind-ended lymph capillaries, which you can see here in this picture. These capillaries are between body cells. They are similar to a siphon hose that's covered with a piece of gauze. Okay, so if you've ever, I kind of use the example, if you've ever siphoned off gas, you put the hose in the gas tank, and then you actually have to suck until the gas comes out. You get it in your mouth, that sort of thing. Well, what happens here is that these have a filter on it. So it's going to pull fluid, but it's also going to filter what gets to come into the vessel, okay, through that gauze or that filter. This interstitial fluid, which leaked out of the blood capillaries, is going to enter this blind end that you can see here in the picture. These blind ends then are going to become lymphatic capillaries. These are going to merge into larger vessels that we call lymphatic vessels, which then are going to carry the lymph through the lymph nodes. In a little bit, we'll look at what lymph nodes do. We'll look at their structure, but lymph nodes are there to allow for us to be able to filter and be able to get out any foreign invaders that might have gained access into this system. Eventually, the lymph fluid flows through the right lymphatic duct or the thoracic duct, and it's going to enter the subclavian vein. So it's ultimately going to be returned to the blood. It's just going to take a different route to get there through these lymphatic ducts into the subclavian veins. The lymph flows similar to what we saw in the veins, with a milking action of the skeletal muscles with contractions, as well as the respiration movements of that diaphragm moving up and down, which helps pull the fluid up. There's also valves inside the lymphatic vessels which prevent backflow like we see in veins. All right, so if you take a look here, you're going to see that you have the veins that are kind of shown, but you'll also see that there's these green vessels that are located. These green vessels, guys, are the lymphatic vessels. They're going to return the blood to these subclavian veins, which you can see up here in the diagram. If you notice, though, over here in the left, you can see that the drainage Your head, your upper torso, and your right arm is going to go into the right lymphatic duct. But the rest of your body, okay, the major part of your body is going to drain into the thoracic duct, which is located on the left side. All right, and so this is what we're looking at when we're talking about it being returned to the blood. Now, lymphatic tissue is specialized reticular connective tissue. So if you can't remember what reticular connective tissue looks like, go back to chapter 4. You can kind of think of a reticular giraffe. It has that kind of structure to it. It contains a large number of lymphocytes. So we're going to see a large number of those white blood cells located here, those lymphocytes. Now, lymph nodes are encapsulated oval structures, and they're located along these lymphatic vessels. And they're going to, again, help filter out and capture or trap any foreign bodies or invaders. They're scattered throughout the body, usually in groups, and they're named based on where they're located in these groups. So you can see you have the axillary lymph nodes, you have cervical lymph nodes. That's why when you go to the doctor and they start palpating up in here, they're looking at your cervical lymph nodes. You have abdominal lymph nodes, as well as inguinal nodes, which are going to be more in the groin area. The outer region of each node is known as the cortex. It's going to be packed with T lymphocytes and macrophages, which are going to do certain kinds of jobs. However, the inner region of each node is called the medulla, and they're mostly going to contain B cells. Lymphocytes can proliferate here in the medulla, so they can undergo mitosis here in these lymph nodes. Now, the reason they have these specialized T cells, macrophages, and B cells is so that whatever may come through, whether it's a virus, a fungus, a bacteria, a cancer cell, these different cells are there to help be able to take care of it if at all possible. Now, foreign substances can get trapped inside of the lymph node in those reticular fibers. This is when macrophages will come in and phagocyze or eat it and destroy the foreign substance, or T lymphocytes and B lymphocytes can also help destroy them depending on what the foreign invader is. Now, many cancer cells will spread through the lymphatic system. This is a highway for them to gain access to move to other areas in the body, and that's what we call when the cancer has metastasized, it's moved to a new area. This is why a lot of times that if cancer is located in a certain area, the lymph nodes in those areas will also be removed to make sure that they don't allow the spread of the cancer. Especially in breast cancer, if a woman has like a mastectomy, where they remove the breast tissue, they will normally also remove the axillary lymph nodes in that area as well, so that if there's any breast cancer cells that broke off, they can't gain access into this lymph system and travel through other parts of the body. It's a preventative type measure. However, it's not 100% of the time. Sometimes they've already gained access and they've traveled to a far distance and set up shop and have cancer in a new area that started as breast cancer, but now it's in the bones, the liver, wherever it might be. So guys, this is the structure of the lymph node. Okay, over here on the left side, you're going to see what the lymph node looks like in the body. Okay, you can see that it's a kind of oval shaped structure when we have a lot of vessels coming in and out of the lymph node that's going to be bringing fluid in and then also taking fluid out. So the afferent is going to be the fluid that comes in, and the efferent is the fluid that's going to go out. Over here on the right side, you can see the more cartoony type diagram, which shows you what it looks like. You'll see that you have the cortex, which is going to have those T cells and macrophages, where you have the medulla, which is going to contain more of the B cells. The fluid comes through here, it gets filtered, and if stuff is too big or it's a foreign invader, it gets trapped in these areas. This brings us to some other tissues we need to look at that are part of the lymphatic system, which are the tonsils and the adenoids. You have what we call the palatine tonsils. This is the pair which can be seen when you open your mouth and you go, ah, and you can see them on each side. These are removed when you have a tonsillectomy. You also have a pharyngeal tonsil. This is going to be at the back and at the top. It's a single adenoid which is embedded in the posterior wall of your nasopharynx, so it's up high back there at the back of your throat by your nose. nose. And so it's what we call an adenoid. You also have a lingual tonsil, which is a pair of tonsils that are on the very back of the tongue. So deep in the tongue, there's another pair of tonsils. So guys, just those tonsils we normally talk about that are right there in the throat, that when you say, oh, you can see, those aren't the only tonsils that you have. All of the above are clusters of large lymphatic nodules. They're smaller than lymph nodes, but they are embedded in this mucous membrane to do the same kind of purpose of trapping invaders as they come through, because this is an opening to the outside world. We're talking about your mouth and your nose. Another example of something similar to tonsils or adenoids or prior patches, these are lymphatic nodules that are part of the ileum, the small intestine. They kind of do the same thing though. Whenever they absorb dietary fats and things like that, if invaders are to get in, they try to help take care of that as well. The whole point of your tonsils and adenoids are to protect against foreign invaders, similar to lymph nodes. Their whole purpose is to filter, trap, and destroy whatever comes in. The next one that we see is the spleen. The spleen is the largest mass of lymphatic tissue in your body. It's in your left hypochondriac region, so it's on the left side up high in your abdominal cavity. The spleen a lot of times looks like kind of like a tongue type structure when you're dissecting. If you ever had the opportunity to dissect a pig or something like that, that's what it kind of looks like. The spleen is the primary site for B lymphocyte proliferation. So when those B lymphocytes undergo the process of maturing, a lot of times they do that maturing in the spleen area. Inside the spleen, foreign invaders and old red blood cells as well as platelets get phagocytized. So what we look at here as the spleen is it kind of cleans up the area. Foreign invaders that come in and get trapped, it'll act like a lymph node. However, when red blood cells get too old and we need to break them down for their parts, the spleen does this, as well as with platelets. Now, when we look at this, a spleen the spleen also stores a significant volume of blood at any given time. So a lot of blood is going to be located in the spleen at any given time. And so if your spleen gets a laceration or it ruptures, it needs to be removed quickly to prevent fatal hemorrhaging, because so much blood does come through here that if it's not taken care of quickly, it can be fatal due to the amount of blood loss that can happen. Now, you can live without your spleen. B cells can still undergo their proliferation. They just do it. They finish doing it in the bone marrow. The red blood cells and platelets can also be recycled by the liver. So you can live without your spleen. It just makes other structures have to work a little bit harder. The last tissue I want to talk about that's part of the lymphatic system is the thymus gland. The thymus gland is the site of the T lymphocyte maturity. The thymus gland, you can see, is located here. It's right above the heart and between the lungs, and so it's located behind the sternum right here. It also kind of has a butterfly shape with it. The thymus is very active when we're younger. As we grow older, the thymus starts to atrophy and get smaller, and it does not produce as many T cells as it did earlier on. But this is the site where T lymphocytes undergo maturity. When we get to the second part of chapter 22, we will talk more about how your immune system works and the role of these B lymphocytes and T lymphocytes. Like right now, you just learned of where they kind of come from. We will then learn about what they do and how they function and why they're important in the next lecture. All right, so again, if you have any questions or concerns, please let me know.